wind howled outside as I sat in my dimly lit living room, the only source of light coming from the flickering TV. The storm had knocked out the power an hour ago, and I had been trying to distract myself with an old horror movie on DVD. It wasn't working. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the trees outside, seemed to amplify the oppressive darkness. I had moved into the old Victorian house a few months ago. The previous owner, an elderly woman, had passed away under mysterious circumstances, but I hadn't let that bother me. The price was too good to pass up, and I needed a fresh start. But lately, things had started to feel off. I would hear footsteps in the attic, though I knew I was alone. Doors would creak open on their own, and there was the feeling of being watched, always, from the shadows. As the movie ended, the screen went black, and I was left in silence. I decided it was time for bed. Grabbing my flashlight, I made my way up the creaky staircase to my bedroom. The narrow hallway seemed to stretch endlessly in the darkness, each step echoing like a drumbeat. I reached my bedroom door and paused. The feeling was back, that prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I turned quickly, shining the flashlight down the hallway, but saw nothing. Shaking my head, I pushed open the door and stepped inside, closing it firmly behind me. The room felt colder than usual, and I hurried to the bed, pulling the covers around me. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself that it was just the storm, just my imagination, but sleep didn't come easy. I awoke suddenly in the middle of the night, heart pounding. The room was pitch black, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came back: the storm, the power outage, the creepy old house. I listened intently, strained to hear over the pounding rain. There it was again, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from the attic directly above me. I froze, holding my breath. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right above my head. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was paralyzed with fear. Then, suddenly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. Silence, that kind that presses in on you and makes your ears ring. I forced myself to move, to get out of bed. I needed to see what was up there, to prove to myself that it was just nothing. Grabbing the flashlight, I crept out of my room and down the hall to the attic. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle. The door creaked open, revealing the narrow staircase leading into the darkness. Taking a breath, I began to climb. The wooden steps groaned under my weight, and the air grew colder with each step. At the top, I found myself in the attic, a dusty, cluttered space filled with old furniture and boxes. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Then I saw it. In the far corner, something moved. I swung the flashlight around, and there, standing by an old wardrobe, was a figure, a woman, her face pale and eyes hollow, staring straight at me. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She moved toward me, her movements jerky and unnatural. I stumbled back, tripping over a box and falling to the floor. The flashlight rolled away, leaving me in the darkness. I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding in my chest. I could hear her now, her raspy breathing, the sound of her bare feet on the wooden floor. I ran, down the stairs, through the hallway, and into my room, slamming the door behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for breath. Silence. Had I imagined it? No, the fear was too real. I had seen her. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed by the door, listening and waiting. The storm passed, and dawn broke. bringing the light and a semblance of safety. But I knew I couldn't stay. The house wasn't mine. It never had been. It belonged to her, and she wanted me gone. The woods behind our old family cabin always had an eerie feel, especially at night. Growing up, my grandmother used to warn me about the silent ones who roamed the forest. Beings who would steal your voice if they found you after dark. I always dismissed it as folklore, meant to keep kids from wandering too far. But now, as an adult, I wasn't so sure. One autumn evening, I decided to walk through those very woods. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching underfoot as I ventured deeper. The sun began to set, casting long shadows that danced like spectres among the trees. I checked my watch. It was getting late, time to head back. As I turned to retrace my steps, I realised the path looked unfamiliar. Panic set in. The trees, twisted and gnarled, seemed to close in on me, their branches reaching out like skeletal figures. I quickened my pace, hoping to find a familiar landmark. That's when I heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, carried on the wind. It was crying for help. It was a child's voice, fragile and distant. I stopped, straining my ears. The voice seemed to come from deeper within the forest. Against my better judgment, I followed it. The further I walked, the more distorted the forest became. The once vibrant foliage turned sickly and decayed, and the air grew thick with the stench of rot. I heard it again. The voice was clearer now, just ahead. I stumbled into a small clearing and froze. In the centre stood a young girl, no older than 8 or 9. Her dress tattered and stained with mud. Her eyes were hollow, devoid of life, yet they seemed to plead with me. "Are you lost?" I asked, my voice trembling. She nodded slowly and pointed to a narrow path leading deeper into the woods. I hesitated, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. But something in those empty eyes compelled me to move forward. We walked in silence, the oppressive quiet only broke by the occasional snap of a twig. I tried to make conversation, but the girl never responded. She just kept pointing ahead. My unease grew with each step. I felt as if I was being watched, the sensation of unseen eyes boring into my back. Finally, we reached an old cabin, one I had never seen despite all my years of exploring these woods. The girl stopped at the door, looking at me expectantly. I reached for the handle, the wood cold and damp under my touch. As the door creaked open, a wave of nausea washed over me. The interior was dark, the air was thick, with dust and decay. "Is this your home?" I asked, turning to the girl. But she was gone. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The walls were lined with old, tattered photographs, their subjects' faces scratched out. An overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. Then I heard it, whispers echoing from the shadows. They grew louder, more insistent. I stumbled back, desperate to escape, but the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The room grew colder, my breath visible in the air. Shadows stood in the corners, taking on ghastly shapes. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My voice, my very breath, seemed to be sucked away. In the midst of my terror, I saw her again, the girl, standing in the doorway, her eyes now filled with malice. She opened her mouth, and from it flowed a torrent of whispers, voices of countless souls trapped in this cursed place. I realized then that I had become one of the silent ones, doomed to wander the forest, voiceless and forgotten. My only solace was the hope that someday someone would heed my call for help and maybe, just maybe, find a way to break the curse. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and check out my other horror stories on the screen now. And until next time, sleep tight.